Hi everyone. Sorry for my somewhat weird surroundings here. I'm currently filming a short film of mine all weekend. We got like 16-hour days going here. So in this quick 15 to 20 minute break of filming, I hope to do my presentation to you on Fredric Jameson. This is not my Che Guevara poster, by the way. This is just in the studio, but I think it's quite appropriate for studying the Marxism of Fredric Jameson. So in this quick video, I'm going to offer an example of Fredric Jameson's Marxist method of literary and cultural interpretation, while offering an introduction to its structure and some of its more fine details. So, due to the political nature of the novel and its wide readership, I'm going to use George Orwell's 1984 as the object of my Marxist analysis. This should be fun. Watch over me, Shay. All right, so Jameson sees a problem with the cultural studies of his time period. He views it as a clear struggle of priority between theoretical analysis, model, and textual analysis, history. So it's somewhat like an argument, each person trying to speak over the other. So theoretical analysis says, you will adduce to support my abstract position, while textual analysis says, you are nothing but methodological scaffolding. So Jameson believes that there is a third position existing that unifies these two categories. And surprise, surprise, it's Marxism. Jameson writes that Marxism, as a dialectic, affirms the primacy of theory, which is at one and the same time a recognition of the primacy of history itself. This idea will be summarized at the end of the lecture when we've kind of gone through all the points already. To demonstrate Marxism as a precondition for adequate literary comprehension, Jameson suggests three phases of interpretive frameworks, rooted in Marxist methodology that provide, quote, semantic enrichment to a material text, which mark a widening out of a text's sense of social ground, putting it into a larger conversation. So I conceptualize these three schools in three drawings here, which I will explain. So these phases are political history, which is composed of grasping an individual work as a symbolic act. The second is into a social order, which places the text into a relational discourse of class struggle, which is built of smaller ideological units, similar to language, known as ideologians. And finally, into the ultimate category of Jameson's methodology is an ideology of form, which is composed of multiple sign systems that anticipate modes of production, but attempt to transcend the determinism and synchronicity of other Marxist thinkers. So, in the realm of political history, we see the idea of the political unconscious come out on an individual level. That is, we look at the relationship between the author and the text, or the cultural artifact. Jameson claims that the creation of a cultural text or artifact is itself an ideological act, because authors seek resolution for social and political problems in their life through the text. These influences on the text are called contradictions. These social and political problems are an absent cause. They are not entirely contextual. That governs what the text is capable of representing within the world of ideology the writer exists in. These social and political factors are the subtext to a text. And in the practice of political history, it is the role of the interpreter to discover these root contradictions that inform the subject and thus retextualize the ideological realm of the author that informed the text. So I represent this relationship in this next image here. So if the only way a subject can access the real is through ideology, that subject's perception and experience is inherently connected in this circle of subject and ideology. But if we take Jameson's ideas and some structuralist ideas of the subject being inseparable from the text, that the text is arising from the subject's experience, and the subject's experience is informed by ideology, then this is actually one large grouping where it is ideology itself which is informing the creation of the text and actually has no connection to a real that exists outside the author or a historical moment. So if we were looking at 1984 from this phase of analysis, we could not say that Big Brother is a reference to Stalin. It's not that simple. Rather, we would perhaps look at how, to Orwell, Big Brother functions as a singular embodiment of all social political resentment, rather than the far more complex, multi-leveled, and systematic nature of actual political repression. So perhaps the figure of Big Brother resolves Orwell's troubles surrounding where to project his anger. Again, political history is not looking for a real historical moment to reflect to. Rather, it is focused on the absent ideological causes that make the text possible. The text, then, is a symbolic act. A symbol for the ideological world the text is informed by from the author. So when thinking about this text as a symbolic act, I like to go back to Saussure. So Saussure puts the symbolic outside his study of language because the form of the symbol clearly references that which it is symbolizing. There's an inherent quality that it is symbolizing related to its symbolization. Think of the image of the scale as a symbol of balance or justice, or even on a more basic level, an image of a dog. That's Rover. I'm sorry for my terrible dog drawing. Representing a dog. So the text functions in the exact same way, but it serves as a symbol of the ideological and experiential world of its author. It is not a relationship between text as a signifier for a concrete reality or a signify that exists beyond the writer. A text is only a symbolic representation of the world of the author, which is actively being influenced by factors related to the political unconscious. Thus, as Jameson says, we are not studying a common sense external reality, not even the conventional narratives of history manuals, but the restructuring and textualizing of the real within the text, whether conscious or unconscious. So the realm of the social is the next kind of phase in Jameson's Marxist methodology, where the previous sections focus on the univocal contradiction, factors that shape the possibilities of an individual text to the place of individual symbolic resolution. Under the social, these shaping possibilities of the texts are made dialogical due to the relational and antagonistic structure of class struggle. So to represent that, I have my little proletariat and my little very wealthy classist man. So under Jameson's kind of analysis, we can't view just the peasant, we need food, or just the rich man, not if it costs me money, as separate individuals, separate almost castes that we can study, because their very existence in an ideological and social framework is relational. It's due to one another. And despite their groans, they are united. And this is how we must look at class, and this is how we must look at the struggle of it. So class in Marxist tradition is constructed relationally, like I said, and therefore each class can't be explored without contemplating its opposition. So Jameson sees the text as a node within a larger discourse of class struggle, comparing it to a vocal utterance in a system of language. Jameson thinks this metaphor is perfect because, taking from Saussure, Langue is an ideal construct that is never wholly visible and never fully represented in any one of its individual utterances, the text. Thus, the totality of class struggle and discourse can't be represented in a single text. So to explain that idea of idiogens, I have this image here, which portrays class struggle as a relational force, the text as being an object within that discourse of class struggle, and then the ideologium as being almost like a theme within the text, which is composed of both narrative and theoretical frames, which I'll explain next. So Jameson breaks the text into ideologiums, like we said, which are the smallest unit of ideology. These can be easily seen as something like themes within a novel, smaller units of abstraction alongside narrative material. With ideologiums are elaborated, they can take on the finished appearance of philosophical systems or a cultural text. Each of these are a complex transformation of the raw material of ideologiums. An ideologium in 1984 could be the mirror narrative of Winston's neighbor being ratted out to the thought police by his own child. It's a smaller unit of the text that contains a narrative manifestation and a conceptual description. From a class struggle perspective, the novel could be seen as a struggle within Orwell between his rise in fame and finances in his later days, 1984 being one of his last novels, if not his last, and his leftist background, between rooting for the proletariat figure and seeing its success as impossible. So the largest category we get to at the very end of his methodology of Marxism are a focus on the modes of production. Jameson wants to create a method for looking at how the modes of production affect a text without committing a totalizing or synchronous error that he has moved against. Jameson proposes the final frame of this method, which encapsulates political history and class struggle, and that is the idea of cultural revolution and the ideology of forms. The idea of cultural revolution is still tied to social formations, but instead focuses on interactions of social systems within this larger discourse of the modes of production. Jameson focuses on the visible antagonism and contradiction between past, as you can see here, past, present, and future modes of production. That is the survival of old modes of production, their structural dependent position in the new or current system, and anticipatory tendencies which are potentially inconsistent with the existing system. However, this is not limited to moments of transition like the term cultural revolution may seem, but is a constant process at every moment of history, this constant struggle between these different systems of symbol and almost language and sign within the cultural moment. It is a vast historical object. The ideology of forms is, as Jameson describes, the determinate contradiction of the specific messages emitted by these varied sign systems, which coexist in a given artistic process, as well as in a general social formation. Essentially, the idea is that the mode of production in a society is not singular or determinate, but relational, and seen as a series of discontinuous and heterogeneous forms and the interactions between them. In 1984, this large relationship to cultural revolution can be seen via the influence of what Orwell saw as the corruption of the communist project under Stalin. This was tragic to the leftist Orwell, who saw this possible idea of socialist utopia fall to totalitarianism. The novel explores a totalitarian nightmare, while showing the failure of proletariat revolution at the same time. In other words, the novel reflects a drop in the moral authority of communism to Orwell, but also reflects the growing red fear and culture of control that exists in England in response to communism. Again, these aren't looking to external realities, but focus on the influences of ideology upon Orwell, how the outside world, through ideology, influences Orwell and therefore is expressed in his text. So in the novel, Orwell is torn between past ideals and their application. This discontinuity between formal structures of the ideological forms can be seen in the fact that both the United States and the USSR banned the book, the US claiming it was pro-communist, the USSR claiming anti-communist. There are many avenues this model can explore, much beyond 1984 or even within 1984. So just to kind of summarize this a little bit to why Jameson views Marxism as the unifying of the textual analysis and theoretical analysis. To counter thoughts that historicized readings are simply a thematization or reification of history as another interpretive code, Jameson figures history as the experience of necessity. Quote, history is the powerful reorganization of the inert chronological and linear data. It explores necessity behind why what happened, and why it had to happen the way it did. Necessity is not, in a sense, a type of content, but rather the inexorable form of events. History can be apprehended only through its effects, and never directly as some reified force. Therefore, it is untranscendable horizon, a necessity. So in conclusion, if we go back to my wonderful image of Marx here, before I get interrupted, we see that our new Marxist methodological approach in view of history as a necessity unifies theoretical and textual analysis because it allows us to look at theoretical ideas of ideology being expressed consciously in a text, but also allows us to view the text itself as a product of necessity, of having historical and ideological content that we need to uncover in its subtext and connect it to an ideological moment, therefore tying theory and text together. Come with me, comrades. Thank you for watching this brief video. I apologize for noise in the background. They're going to call my name. I got to get back, but thank you for watching, and I look forward to your comments. Thank you very much.